Hello, everybody. All right. Hi. Welcome to Healthy Table Talk, Dietitian Dishing Up Depth. My name is Hannah Koshak. I usually have a beautiful co host here with me named Shannon Warner, who is a founder of Having a Mom Moment podcast, but she can't join me today. She took the day off, but she'll be back next week. Um, so, I really wanted to talk about kids today because when it comes to it, I've mentioned this in the past. Kids have their own relationship with food, and kids will also have a health journey. And kids sometimes resist parents in what we know best. So, if you don't know me and my business, I will tell you I am not your all or nothing dietitian. I'm actually not very similar to what you would see of a dietitian because I have my clinical experience. I help people manage disease. And what I found is there's not enough people talking towards disease prevention. There's not enough people educating in a way that helps people with their relationship with food. And in fact, what I see a lot of is people who talk nutrition end up hurting people's relationship with food. So, I stepped out of the clinical job and stepped out on this terrifying platform to talk into that to help people and on a deeper level outside of the weight stigma and the dieting mindset. So, um, when it comes to kids, I have two kids. They are now almost 7. I'm not giving it to them yet. Almost 7 and 8. So now 6 and 8, really. And I did the whole toddler feeding. I obsessed about what to feed them, what not to feed them, how much, and are they getting enough, and all of that. And what it came down to is actually just knowing that what's most important in feeding your child, and I hope you hear this, what's most important in feeding your child is your child's relationship with food. Not how much nutrition you get in them at that meal, not if they eat the vegetable, or not if they eat enough protein. None of that matters if they are doing battles at mealtime, if they're doing, like too scared to eat new foods. It runs the array of behaviors around meal times is pretty extreme, and that's for a lot of reasons. So I want to talk into those reasons. Mealtime battles. And the reason, again, I'm talking about this is because I've had toddlers. I don't anymore, but I do have kids. And so it's been a huge part of my life. And then, yes, into what I know, which is nutrition and relationship with food. So the fact that I've lived it, teach it, I'm bringing it here. And the whole reason this is called Healthy Table Talk is because I wish more people were having back and forth conversations about real life things with a cup of tea. So, all right, back to it. Mealtime battles. Let's talk about that. Now, remember, a child's brain is not developed, right? So their subconscious is developing, but their logical brain is not there yet. So if they were ever force fed, unfamiliar food or something they said they didn't like, if they were ever disciplined around food, meaning they didn't eat something so they can't have that, or disciplined at the table for their behavior because of what they were or weren't eating, they are going to create usually a negative association with mealtime specifically. That's because now it became unpredictable to them. And it became a time where their behavior could be disciplined for their reaction to what they don't know, right? Like if I just gave you a box of food and I was like, you have to eat it, you would have a lot of resistance. Well, kids are just instinctually having resistance towards food because of its unsafety, meaning unfamiliarity. Therefore, that battle arises because they don't want to be, forced into anything, or they don't want to be punished for anything. So their instincts, again, we know that their communication is crying or fighting or whatever. So with mealtime battles, it's really important to really solidify that they are not going to be disciplined for what they do or don't eat. They're not going to be forced to try new things or try to eat or not eat or anything, because kids are like anybody and will come around through role modeling and their rate of safety, the rate of something being exposed to them enough times, or in the scenario, um, that they're going to jump on or off board with that. The other thing about it is that just like anybody, some of us are in good moods or bad moods depending on what our day is like. And that does affect our eating habits, meaning sometimes we just had a day that we don't feel like eating or we don't feel like eating that. We really are craving this. They have that too. So imagine if you were just craving a nice warm pasta with melted whatever cheese plus your favorite this and that. But I was telling you, you have to eat a cold salad with crunchy croutons and maybe your least favorite vegetable. Your internal cue would be to throw a fit, but they don't have those internal cues, so they just throw the fit. So, just remembering that their barriers are so similar to ours. So, to punish them for that behavior is creating that bad association. And that bad association is what bringing the mealtime battle. That's where it's like they don't want to eat, they're refusing to eat, they're throwing their food. It's all the same. So just knowing that kids' intentions aren't to disrespect you, it's not, they don't know like you've been slaving over this meal all day or that your heart wants to nourish your children. And so when they throw your food, it can be a little offensive, right? They don't know that. They're just doing their instincts. The other thing is just like anybody else, they go through eating phases. If you're a woman, we have hormonal phases. Sometimes we're hungrier than others. Sometimes we crave different things at different times. Kids have growth phases. Sometimes they're starving. Sometimes they love the same foods. Sometimes they don't. And if we don't respect those phases, then they won't be able to really pay attention to their cues. And I don't know about you, but as we get older, we tend to lose that connection of our hunger cues, our satisfaction cues. And just kind of overall, that's where our relationship with food can kind of get bumpy when we tend to overeat or comfort eat. So, helping them respect their hunger cues is helping them identify and paying attention to what they're feeling, what their likes are and dislikes, and the why. Often, if my kids will come to the table and they're like, "I'm not eating that. That's disgusting. Oh my gosh." It's like, "Tell me why. What's disgusting about it to you? What are you feeling?" If they don't say anything about it or they don't like it, it's usually just their mood. It's usually just what's on their mind. It's usually not related to the food at all. But if they're punished for it, that now is associated with that food. It's what happens to vegetables a lot. They're like, these are healthy for you. You have to eat them. And the kid's not ready to try it. They have to try it. And then, therefore, it brings down a whole thing. So, these are, again, usually younger kids. And I'm just speaking into relationship with food. And also thinking about how when it comes to picky eaters. Some people are, some kids will eat anything, right? You know those kids. But some kids have a slower rate of safety when it comes to new foods. That's just their personality type. And so the biggest thing you can do is serve a safe food, which again, kids typically have these like comfort foods where it's like, I only eat mac and cheese or chicken or whatever, right? Like that's their safe food to serve those foods with new foods and to not serve new food. So like if you do serve broccoli and they hate it, like you don't have to not serve it again. You just don't have to force them to eat it. So you could serve it in broccoli soup, you could serve it raw, you could serve it, like in different modifications where they can learn and explore with it and that sometimes they like it soft and they don't like it hard. That's them learning. And they maybe won't associate that the cooked broccoli is the same as the raw, and that's all a learning curve. If they find that they just don't like something, that could also be a phase. Kids' taste buds are way different than adults. And so their sour is really sour and their salty is really salty, right? So it's like they may not in that moment, but it doesn't mean they never will. And that's okay. Like the cool thing about fruits and vegetables is that they all offer a variety of vitamins and minerals, so they can likely get those variety from somewhere else. So if you're jumping on and you have any specific questions about, the kids' relationship with food or just how to work around a barrier or struggle, put it in the chat or message me. But this is a big topic because what has happened in the past too is that it's easy to put our relationship with our food habits onto our kids. And that's where you start to think about like, what does that look like? Like comfort eating or coping with food. If your kid is going through a hard time or crying or upset or bored, do you put a snack in front of them? Do you, ask them to eat? Do you celebrate around food all the time? Do you have, a lot of eating family happy bonds around food? And don't get me wrong, I know food can be social in a lot of good, positive ways that way, but it is something to think about is that coping with food, it can be as simple as boredom eating, where you're just bored and looking for something, and that's food. It can be as simple as stressed, anxious, loneliness. All of those things can be coped. And therefore, what happens is a parent's habits can definitely go into the child's habit. And therefore, it is usually set up for them to have to struggle just like we all are. Um, What else? So I can tell you with my kids, I have one that probably is a little more picky than the other, but I am certainly never going to say you're a picky eater or you're the picky eater. Because if you identify that in them in that way, like I said, their subconscious is currently developing. They will hear that and they will label themselves that and they will believe it. And that is just what it is to them. They will own that. They, in fact, are um, whatever, a picky eater. And so if they believe that, it just gives them more grounds to do that. And in fact, if you say the opposite, like, wow, that was a great job exploring new foods, or what do you want to explore today? Or what food looks fun in, the moment, or let them go to the farmer's market and they each get some money to pick something. Encourage them to be that explorative eater. They're going to associate their habits with that. So you want to be sure to always not label them, but always think of the positive or the alternative to help them with growth rather than to just like identify them and then have them claim it. And so, like I said, my one little guy, he typically isn't as explorative as my older one, but I was cutting veggies and he was, I don't know, probably 2.5 or 3, and he grabbed the cauliflower and just ate a big bite out of that raw head of cauliflower, and he just kept going. That's definitely something I wouldn't have assumed. I wouldn't have offered raw cauliflower, right? So that's just where you don't, and I didn't even really overly praise him because that also puts pressure on it that like there's good foods and bad foods, and he's a good boy or not a good boy for any of that. Um, oh, let's talk about that too. The Clean Plate Club or praising kids for eating well or whatever. Let's talk into that. So now if I, was out and I said to you, um, you know what, you're the gosh, why I wish I was prepared with an analogy, but all to say, like, oh, you're the cook in the family. That's amazing. I think that's so good. You're doing such a great job. What can happen is that when you don't cook, you don't feel like you're doing a good job just because I'm overly praising you for this. It's the same thing with their eating habits. If they get overly praised for eating well or finishing their plate, or wow, look how good you ate, or oh, good job for eating that, it can absolutely create the association that if they don't feel like eating a day, or if they don't want to, finish their plate, that they didn't do a good job eating, or that they're not doing as well. And for some kids are really fueled by that like go get it attitude that can actually affect them, and that they're like, I want to be that good kid. I want to do well. I want to impress you. So they'll, eat well or finish their food for that reason rather than what are they feeling into, right? Like their hunger cues and satisfaction cues. When are they full? When should they stop? So, certainly forcing kids to clean their plate or encouraging them to eat more or really praising them for eating really well can just throw mixed messages. In fact, I try not to comment on my kids' eating habits much at all and let them figure it out themselves. But sometimes what I have done is spoke out loud to myself in front of them to help their subconscious develop. So sometimes I'll say, oh my goodness, I'm so full, but I really want seconds because it was so yummy. and I kind of think it out loud, and then I'll say, but you know what? I know how it feels when I eat too much, so I'm going to stop right there. And so I'm kind of talking out loud as their subconscious is developing. They're going to kind of gravitate or like listen, which settles in a little bit to their subconscious. So if they're always just automatically going for more food, that will start to settle in like, well, how am I feeling? Do I actually want more food? Or is this just like a, um, something to whatever, like, you know, we all get, I really want to drink my tea, but it's so hot. Mm. All right, we're good now. So, this is a lot of conversation in a little time, but when I'm talking to my clients or my members of the Wholesome Collective, they often have kids, and that's really important that they're feeding their family well, or it's important to them that their kids don't have those same struggles that they did growing up, or it's important to them to stop the cycle of whatever it is, whether it's like comfort eating, reward eating, or just sugar addictions, all of that, because they know how hard it is to pull out of that type of thing. So, all right. Yes. When it comes to kids, they all have different personalities and different, attitudes. And that's a blessing. And it's certainly not something to be compared. So, if you have more than one kid, thinking about how you're talking to one kid versus the other, especially if the other is like the picky eater, it's probably not appropriate to compare kids to say, well, your brother finished his. Look at your brother eating his broccoli, or your sister or whoever. Look at them. Wow, that's pretty great, because that can build up some resentment between the two for no given reason that is their own, right? That's not fair, because if you actually despise liver and I was praising this person and you felt the pressure to eat the liver for that praise, that would feel pretty heavy, right? Especially with kids who really seek love and praise. That's like their whole soul connection is through love and praise. Even if they don't say that, we know that as adults, right? So to offer it to one kid and not the other for eating habits can actually do the opposite of whatever you're trying to do, right? It's usually not helpful. What else? We can talk about older kids a little bit. So now past the toddler range into young kids, youth, I can speak a little bit on just overall lifestyle habits. At this point, keeping in mind that their health journey and lifestyle is a wash. So if they eat something that you're not entirely proud of, or if they don't eat things, just knowing that how you can offer it is the most important, not so much forcing them to eat it or encouraging them. So you can say if they're motivated by something, in this case, my little guys are motivated by baseball. I've said, like, hey, balanced meals really help you get everything you need so you can function your best and have your best game. Like knowing that like that food is going to help you versus like just eating cookies or whatever, something that they're motivated by to associate, but not to say in a shameful way, but in a positive way. So balanced meals are kind of something that we encourage, where you're just eating a little bit of what you can, everything, you know, to a point of not just eating the same thing all the time. Because when they get older, you can have those conversations with them. But when they're younger, they're not ready for that. So when they're older too, you can kind of say, like, well, what do you think? Do you think that's a good habit to get into, having ice cream every night? And then when they're like, yeah, it's a great habit. Okay, so how is that going to help you? And how could it maybe not help you? Having them talk through something and then just having both perspectives is a good way for them to come to their own conclusions, because no matter what, kids will always have that battle. So as they get older, they just don't want you to tell them what to do. They just don't want to be told what to do or not do. And so helping them come to their own conclusion is a way to get them, either on board or at least to be more thoughtful about what they're doing. And even if they're doing it, they at least have thought it through or been encouraged to, which puts them in the habit of doing that in general, right? Like, it's probably not a good idea to eat for licorice for every lunch for, 3 days, right? Like, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it's just good for them to have that process to talk it through. And now that my kids are older, that's when I've kind of done, again, talking to myself of like, oh, you know what? I noticed that I'm just bored right now. So I'm just going to put this away. I'm going to go find something to do. It's not to say it's bad to boredom eat. It's just that it's the thought process of, is this the only option? What are other options? And for kids in general, they're forming their habits through usually what their lifestyle looks like. But if they're living a very active lifestyle, if they're playing a lot of sports or if they're outside a lot, it may seem more like they're eating a lot because when they are indoors or when they are calmed down, they always want to eat. But that just supports their lifestyle. So just paying attention to how their habits are established and built doesn't always mean good or bad. It just means what they are. So sometimes that could mean, yeah, I don't know. It's always hard when I'm talking to nobody because it's nothing specific. Yet I'm trying to talk to everybody. Just here to say this is Table Talk where we bring these conversations. So bring it up, we'll talk about it. Or if you have any questions, message me or put it in the chat and I'll bring it to a different Table Talk. And next time Shannon will be back, which will bring new perspectives, questions. She doesn't have a health background, which is why it's such a fun relationship we have because she can ask those authentic questions. All right. If you've been listening to a couple of these talks, you maybe are wondering who I am and what I do. I run a membership called the Wholesome Collective, where we're doing virtual cooking classes, weekly virtual coaching, master classes, and guest interviews with other health professionals. My focus is not to put you on some restrictive plan. My focus is to help people create a lifestyle that supports wellness and longevity so they can have the best quality of life. Because remember, I came from the hospital setting. People did not have a good quality of life, and it's all they wanted was that back. But when you leave the hospital, is all people care about is how to fit in that certain gene size. When you let the gene size go and realize that your quality of life is your true freedom, the gene size just falls into place without that overhead pressure. You just got to create the lifestyle. So that's what we're doing in the Wholesome Collective. However, I also thought of a way to invite people in to what I'm doing without being a member. So I'm now selling the master classes as a one-off. So you can just purchase the master class, join live, and then you'll also get the recording. It switches every month. Last month we talked about improving your cholesterol to avoid medications. This month we are talking about heart health and longevity. Anyways, I'm here for you. Let me know if there's any way I can help or any conversations you want brought to the table. But thanks for listening. I appreciate you.